All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. So today I wanted to make a video about one of the most iconic and arguably one of the most important classic bodybuilders in bodybuilding history due to his contribution to the initial title wins of winning the first ever Mr. America competition and also the first ever Mr. Universe competition. So first we have to go all the way back to 1940 where John Grimek won his first Mr. America title. So back at that time, there was a competition held the year prior in 1939, but it was not yet called the Mr. America. It was called America's Best Built Man, and it was not sanctioned by the AAU until 1940. So 1940 was the first year there was a sanctioned title of Mr. America. That is the title that you won, and that began in 1940 with John Grimek winning the first Mr. America title. And then, of course, in true IFBB fashion, Joe and Ben Weider would start their own IFBB Mr. America title in 1949. But when people talk about the Mr. America title, just keep in mind that the AAU is the oldest and most respected Mr. America title there is. So the greatest Mr. Americas, in my opinion, came out of the AAU. So now let's fast forward about 8 years. Now, John Grimek had won two Mr. America titles back-to-back in 1940 and 1941. Then when you fast forward to 1948, John Grimek would win the first ever Mr. Universe competition. So back in 1948, there was no NABA yet. NABA was not an organization. There was no pro or amateur. There was just the Mr. Universe. So the very first Mr. Universe title ever won was won by John Grimek in 1948, where he defeated the legendary Steve Reeves to win that title. Now in 1949, there was not a Mr. Universe competition held the following year, because during this time, the people that arranged this first Mr. Universe competition, in fact, the person that arranged it was David Johnston, who was the editor of Strength and Health magazine, which you can see right here with John Grimek on the cover posing on kind of this Greek pillar, one of the most iconic covers of Strength and Health magazine, in my opinion. This actual specific cover was the issue of the magazine that they were using to promote this Mr. Universe competition. So originally it was Strength and Health magazine putting on the Mr. Universe. Then they would skip the 1949 Mr. Universe because that's when NABA was being formed. So you could say John Grimek played a key role in the formation of NABA by winning that first ever Mr. Universe and promoting that first ever Mr. Universe, which would become one of the most prestigious and longest running titles in the history of bodybuilding, the NABA Mr. Universe title, which would become more sought after in some cases than the Mr. Olympia title. So then in 1949, John Grimek would go on to win the Mr. USA title, making him a two-time Mr. America, first Mr. Universe winner, and Mr. USA winner. But if we rewind back to 1936, before his bodybuilding career, he was also on the U.S. Olympic weightlifting team. And he's known for training and working at York Barbell, the famous York Barbell, which arguably changed the course of weightlifting history in America forever with that 1936 Olympic team that basically was trained out of York Barbell. Now, just to give you guys some frame of reference for how strong he really was, his body weight was between 215 and 225 pounds, or 93 to 102.1 kilograms, standing at a height of 5 foot 8 inches tall, or 172.5 centimeters. Now, at that height and weight, his best bench press was 480 pounds, his best deadlift was 600 pounds, and his best squat was 700 pounds. Now, keep in mind, this was during the 1930s and 1940s. It's not like it is today. A 600-pound deadlift was not an everyday thing. This was not something you're seeing, all the time on Instagram like you see today. A 600-pound deadlift in the 30s and 40s was a very rare feat of strength. And the same could be said for a 5-plate bench press back then. I mean, that was just an insane feat of strength for someone during that era. And John Grimek was doing all of these things. One of the best bodybuilders to come out of that era, one of the pound-for-pound strongest men to come out of that era, one of the most groundbreaking bodybuilders to come out of that era, winning 2 inaugural titles of 2 of the competitions that would become the longest running and most prestigious titles ever. This guy was, the pioneer, the trailblazer for both of those competitions. So as I mentioned, in 1949, John Grimek would go on to compete in the AAU Mr. USA. And when he competed in that competition, he announced that would be his last bodybuilding competition ever. He would obviously win that show, beating guys like Clarence Ross, George Eiferman, and Steve Reeves for a second time. And Steve Reeves himself has even been quoted as saying John Grimek is the best bodybuilder that he has ever gone up against on the face of the world. So unfortunately, back in 1998, John Grimek passed away. at the age of 88 years old. And the interesting thing about this was pretty soon after his death, he was actually inducted into the IFBB Hall of Fame, despite the fact that he had never competed in an IFBB competition. So I found that to be a little bit interesting, that the IFBB claimed him, even though he was kind of the trailblazer for both organizations that were direct rivals to the IFBB, really. So that is the story of John Grimek, guys, one of the greatest bodybuilders to come out of the 30s and 40s era of bodybuilding. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, and please give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.